What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TW Motorsports, and today, yes, we are back on the Green Sierra pickup. So in the last video, I kind of left you guys hanging. We got the intake on, we got a lot of the wiring harness in, we got the transmission in, the converter in the transmission, and the transmission up in the truck. Everything's bolted on. So now, where I left it off was we had just taken the transmission pan off, just like I said, because I wanted to drain this thing. I don't have a way to hold it up, to drain it anywhere else. So I wanted the transmission in the truck, and then I knew I was going to do this. This is actually what they consider the deep pan. It's a little bit deeper than the other one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire wheel the area where the actual gasket goes and clean up the bolts and the bottom of the pan a little bit. And then we'll crawl under there. I'll show you kind of how the filter goes in and whatnot. But there are two different ones, just so you guys know. And then I'm not really sure where we're going to go from there. I do have the headers over there. Now, I guess we'll talk about that when I get ready to put the headers in. But they are Speed Engineering. I've used them on several things. Now, these are the older Speed Engineering before they had a velocity spike in the actual collector. So not going to be quite as much power. You might leave 5 horsepower on the table by not having that. But here's the problem. They are out of stock, and so I actually purchased these used, but they were new. They've never been installed. So I'm not real sure on the fitment on these because I know they've changed some things, so hopefully everything fits well. But I couldn't order them new right now because they're on back order for like 2 months. So we're going to have to deal with what we got, but we'll talk more about that when we get to that point. I think, like I said, the first thing I want to do, I'm going to clean this pan up off camera, and then we'll slide under this thing. I did want to show you guys real quick before I start blowing into this what I'm using. This is just a wire wheel that goes on your drill, and believe me, guys, you can scrape this and use some carb cleaner or like brake cleaner like this, but it's going to take you forever with like a razor blade. This thing will knock it out quickly, and it doesn't really damage anything. It just makes sure all that old gasket's off, which we want because we don't want any leaks. So I just wanted to show you guys real quick before we slid under the truck. Like I said, I'm going to clean this off camera, and but I wanted to show you how I'm going to be cleaning it off. So I've got the pan and the bolts all cleaned up, and you can see that I put the gasket down in place, and then I started all the bolts all the way around. Now that we're finished with that, I did also go over the bottom down here, and so I went over the mounting surface that it's going to mate up to, and so now I need to go ahead and pull the filter out, which is this big black box right here. I'm just going to pull straight down and get it out of the way, and then we'll grab the new one. So I got the new one here, or sorry, the old one in the pan here and the new one. So you want to kind of put them up beside each other, making sure that you've got the correct one, which, like I said, I have the deep pan, so it is different. The other thing, guys, is there is a grommet, essentially. Now these press in, so generally if they don't come out with the filter, I leave the original one in. Now if you look up in there and all the rubber's beat up, you do need to try to get that out, but it is a pain, I will tell you, because it is kind of a press fit. I'm going to leave the current one that's in it because it looks good. So now we're just going to push this back up into place, and then we can grab the pan and start tightening or snugging down some of the bolts. So as you can see, I've got the filter in place, and you just push it up snug, and it fits in there really nice, so you shouldn't have any issues there. Like I said, I didn't replace that grommet at the top, and I just lightly threaded these all in. Now it's time to torque these. They get torqued to 108 inch-pounds or 9 foot-pounds, whichever you'd like to do. And I do go in a crisscross pattern, so one side here and then the other side, and I do both the driver and the passenger side, and then I go to the front and back. So that's similar to the way the sequence is set up. I've never really tightened them following a direct sequence before, just kind of alternating, and never had any leaks or any issues. But I will say I had to take a T40 out right here. This holds your shifter, and if you don't take that out, you can't get the pan in or out, so you do need a T40. That is the size for it. But after we get these torqued down, I think I'll go ahead and drag the line up here and see if we can get it hooked up. So now that we got the pan torqued down, it's time to put the torque converter bolts in. So what you need to do is you get a 24 millimeter on the crank bolt, and you spin the flex plate around until you see the hole. You can see it right there. Now, chances are your torque converter is not going to be lined up, but you can put your hand behind it and move the torque converter until one of the holes line up. Now, this is the very important part. You need to just start the threads on one. And the reason I say that is if you run it all the way down, you may get to the next one and it might not quite line up. Sometimes they're a little bit off, so there's generally only one or two ways they can go together. And so if you go ahead and tighten one all the way down, when you get to the next one, it may not fit. So what I do is I thread it in a couple times, and I move to the next one. I do the same, and you want to try to equally thread them in, because if you thread, let's say you threaded this first one in 2 threads, but then the next one you thread it in way further, it's going to push that bolt head out and you won't be able to turn it over. And believe me, that's a mess. Don't do that. So like I said, thread it in like 2 turns just to make sure you get it in place. Turn it, put the next one in, and so on. And once we get them all in, then we'll gradually do the same thing. If you, like I said, if you don't, you're going to push the other ones out and it's going to get caught and you won't be able to turn the motor over. Once we have those all in place, so all 3 of them, we can go ahead and torque them down. So 46 foot-pounds is what the factory rating is. And I did buy new converter bolts. Obviously, we run the other ones, and I'll list those down in the description like always. But in order to get the torque on them that I need, I can't really get my torque wrench there. So what I've done, I put an extension on it so I can swing a little further back here. So I'm going to go ahead. I'll probably do this twice. I'll torque one down, move it, go through all 3, and then I'll start over again just to make sure that, you know, sometimes when one draws close, the other one loses a little bit of its torque setting. So like I said, I'll go around this twice, and then we will hopefully move on to putting the flywheel locking tool in place since I'm down here, and we'll get the crank or the harmonic balancer in place. Now that we have them all torqued down, you can see my flywheel locking tool is in place. And guys, I just have a bolt in the crank right now. I don't have the balancer on, so I'm gonna go grab the balancer and my installer tool, but you're gonna need to hold this flywheel somehow, and believe me, this tool is just one of the best things ever made. It's kind of a pain to get in once the transmission's in, but not too bad, I guess. I'm gonna go grab that balancer installer and the balancer, and we'll show you how to do that. So how this installer works is, obviously you need to take your old bolt out, and you probably already have it out, but this, you put your balancer up to the actual block, and then you're going to put this, you're going to thread this in. And what this does is you hold the backside here, and it actually pulls the balancer on. Now, a lot of people try to use the new bolt to pull the balancer on. Guys, that is not a good idea. It's a good way to strip the threads out. This is the preferred method for getting a balancer in place. And I've had this tool for quite a while, and it is just like the flywheel locking tool. It's been very valuable to me. So I'm going to go ahead, set the balancer up in place, and thread this through the center, and then I'll show you guys it all set up. And well, I'll thread it on a couple threads and give you a look at kind of how it works. So as you can see, I threaded this through the center, and what you want to do is the very back part here, you want to thread that down so it completely stops. Once you do that, then you're going to hold this side while you actually turn this, and like I said, that'll draw that balancer in place, and it does go on just enough to not wobble around on you, so that's good. And I did end up I just resprayed this one. This is the factory one. I was going to use an aftermarket one, but honestly I didn't think I was going to gain much by doing that. It just wasn't worth it to me, so I am going to be reusing the factory one. I'm going to go ahead and get this snug down, and then we'll grab the bolt and we'll talk about how you need to tighten it down. Once you pull it all the way on, it will get tight, and then you can thread this center piece back out, followed by the whole thing. And then we'll grab the bolt. So I did buy a GM bolt instead of like a ARP. To me, guys, $5 for like a GM one, and I've never had one fail. So they are torqued a little bit differently though. So the very first thing you need to do, don't use your old one. Put the new one in, torque it to 240 foot-pounds. Once you do that, you're going to back it off. That's just making sure that it's seated. And then you're going to back it off, you're going to torque it to 37, and then we're going to go 140 degrees. And how I like to do that, because my gun isn't, or my torque wrench isn't fancy, so it doesn't do degrees. So what I do is I put a mark with a Sharpie down the center, and then I can kind of tell, you know, going straight down would be 180 degrees. So basically that's what I do. So I'll put like a half a mark on it, and there's no way for me to show you guys that, but 140 degrees after the 37, which is after the 240, is how you need to put this in place. And that is why we put that flywheel locking tool in place. It is going to move on you if you don't have something to catch it. So I got it about to 140 degrees. You can see my mark is about in the 140 degree place. And guys, how I ended up doing that is I use a breakover bar, and then I have what I call a cheater pipe that I put over it. So it does take a little bit to do it. You can see I've got it laying right there, But now we can move on to taking that flywheel holding tool out and getting ready for the starter. Before we put the starter on, we need to go ahead and put those little closeout panels, the little black plastic closeout panel. It's just a 10 millimeter that bolts in right here. And I'm banging my mic on everything, sorry guys. There's one actually on each side on this truck. So I'm gonna go ahead and put those in, and I just snug those down. I don't have a torque. I mean, you could torque them. I'm sure it's like ridiculously small amount of torque, but I just get them snug, and then we can swing that starter up into place. We will have to hook up that 13 and the 8 millimeter, so go ahead and grab those, and then we'll just swing the starter up and bolt it in place with the two 13s that hold it to the actual block. Now I have the starter up in place. Like I said, I hooked up the 13 millimeter, the main wire, and the 8 millimeter smaller one. And there's two different starters for these guys. There's a long bolt on one side and a short bolt on the other, and then there's a long on both. I actually have a long on both, and so that is why you see what you're seeing. Originally, I thought that I had the short and the long, and I've got a couple of these laying around, so honestly, it doesn't really matter. They all fit. But this one is now in. I'm going to go ahead and torque these to 37 foot-pounds, and then I think I'm going to grab probably the drive shaft and hook it up. So before I put the actual drive shaft in, I want to talk about what I've done here. So this is the drive shaft out of the blue truck, not out of the extended cab. Obviously, the extended cab won't fit. It has a carrier bearing. Anyway, I think that you could probably use the factory drive shaft that the V6 truck had. It should be the same length. The mounting positions are all the same. However, this came out of the blue truck that I bought to originally do this swap with the 4.8. So what I did was I took this to a local drive shaft shop, and they not only put new U-joints in, which I could have done here, but believe me, it's more of a pain. They put new Spicer U-joints in, and they also rebalanced it, and then they painted it. So to me, guys, it was worth I think it was $130 all in. That was the installation, the cost of the actual U-joints, and the balance. So to me, it was worth it. Like I said, I could have banged around here forever on it, and it did, to me, need new U-joints. Anytime I replace something or switch something, I like to put new U-joints in. Anything new that that could be a wear item. So I don't want to have an issue down the road. So let's get this thing in. So essentially how this works is we plug this into the transmission. It'll slide in quite a ways, far enough for us to get clearance to bolt the actual bolts in the back, so these straps that hold it in place. And so I'll get that in there, and I'll show you guys kind of what it looks like, and we'll talk about the torque specs on it. At this point, I've got it slid into place up in the transmission, and then I just have these snug down for now. I was able to, since this thing's off the ground, I can spin the actual rear end and get it where I need it in order to line this up. Just put these 11 millimeters in. Now we need to torque them down. Guys, 15 foot-pounds is all they get, so I'm going to go ahead, torque those, and I'm not real sure what I'm going to go to next. I might go to the headers or something on the front end, I believe. I'm going to go ahead and hook up the, I guess it's the shift linkage. And so there's not a whole lot to this, guys. It goes in through this panel that we had to take off, this bracket right here. And then there is a keeper that I went ahead and slid in, and then all you have to do is, this is just a push connection up front, is hook this on. So I may have jumped the gun here. It looks like I need to put that on and then put it through. So I'm going to do that, and we'll be completely hooked up here. And I think, like I said, I think we'll go on to putting the header in. Now that the shift linkage is hooked up, I did go ahead and push a header up through here. It is a tight fit. I don't know, like I said, if this older design is going to fit as well, but I've got it kind of up in place, and I'm just working by myself here. So I'm going to go grab, I did buy some new GM gaskets, the metal gaskets. I don't like the ones that come with this, guys. Don't use those, they're junk. And I also bought some new bolts because a majority of the time these break off. I bought those from ICT Billet. I'll list that stuff as well, but in the description down below. But at this point, I'm going to see if I can get these started by myself. Hopefully I can. Like I said, I'm working alone, so at least I can get a few started, and then maybe we can see if we can get the other side in as well. So I was actually, it was a little easier than I thought. I think part of the reason is, like I don't know if you guys know this, but I had these heads cleared out, had them cleaned up, and just a valve job done on them, and they also ran
a thread chaser through all of those header bolts because I had a couple broken off. So I think part of the reason it went in so well is because of that. But I was able to hold it up with one hand, get the gasket in, the new gasket in, and get those snug down. Now they're just snug by hand. We're going to go back and torque them here in a minute, but I think I'm going to see if I can get this other side in. I think we may have some issues with the power, or not the power steering line, but the transmission lines down there. But we're going to see kind of where they lay, and I honestly think this one could be put in from the top. It looks like it might be a little easier to go in that way, so we'll just have to see. So on this side, I actually was able to get that in place. Now, granted, there are no AC lines. Now, if there were AC lines, I tried it from the bottom, and I think I'd have to have it quite a ways further off the ground. So if you're doing this and you obviously have your AC lines all hooked up, I think you probably have to go from the bottom and just get it way higher off the ground than what I've got it. Now, I do have it, you know, I don't know, 12 inches or so off the ground. I think you'd have to be more like 24 inches, almost double that, in order to get enough room to get those in place. But let's go ahead, open this gasket up, this manifold gasket or header gasket, put it in place, and got the ICT billet header bolts. So I'm going to see if I can get this one threaded in. If it's as easy as the other side as far as holding it and getting it threaded in, I think I should be able to. Now that we got both the headers on, I haven't tightened them up. They're just finger tight. Let's roll under here and look at what our next issue is. So I've got to do one of two things, and I'm trying to figure out which I want to do. But you can see my exhaust for the Y pipe. I'm trying to put it in. I've got this side in, and I've just got it loosely set on. But I can't get this over here to clear. You can see that I'm just shy of making this connection. So one of two things are going to have to happen. Either I'm going to have to loosen the header and see if it'll move forward just enough to get this started, or I'm going to have to take the transmission cross member out here because I'm hitting right here. So it's just kind of loosely setting up in there. I think the easiest method, I don't think the header will move enough if I loosen it. I'm going to go up there and just unthread it and see before I take the cross member loose, but we're going to see if we can attempt to get this started. I'm going to go ahead and put my clamps on also. So I just experimented with loosening these up, and it just doesn't give me enough room. So I'm going to go ahead and torque these down. So guys, how these torque is starting from the middle and working your way out. So I'm going to start with the two center ones, and then I'm going to alternate. So I'll do one of the center ones and then go to the next one, another center one, go to the next one, and then doing the outside two last on both sides. 11 foot-pounds the first pass, and then 18 the second pass. So I'm going to go ahead and get that accomplished, and then we're just going to have to take that cross member back out. There's just no other way to do it, I don't think, unless you beat a big hole or a dent in your Y pipe, and I don't want to do that. So we'll get those torqued down, and then I'll bring you guys back under once I get the cross member out of the way. I'm probably going to have to support it with probably a transmission jack or a jack of some sort, because it is going to want to fold down. But we'll just have to see as we get that cross member out. So once I got the cross member here out of the way, I have absolutely a ton of room to get this thing into place. I test fitted up on that side, and it did go in. And so now we just need to sandwich it together. Just make sure you don't forget your clamps, because I put it together before without the clamps, and then you got to either pull the clamps apart or take it back apart. So just make sure you slide your clamps on there. I didn't use the clamps that came with the kit. I actually ordered these. These are a Walker part, and I'll list them down below. But I just don't care for the clamps that it had on it. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and get this up into place, and I'll show you guys one more time before I put the cross member up, kind of how it looks. So I've got it back in, and you can see I've got the cross member in place. Guys, when I went to put the cross member up there, it wasn't far enough forward, so I had to knock the exhaust a little further forward. Let me see if I can get the light here. Well, before I do that, I want to show you, I did take this guy off the side, this heat shield, and I'm going to have to trim just this back edge right here. So let me see if I can get it up on the camera. Yeah, this edge right here was hitting on the exhaust. You can see it won't go in there. So I'm going to trim a little bit off it so I can put it back in place. But let's see if I can show you where I've got it hooked all the way up. And I still need to do some cleaning, it looks like, but I've got it hooked to the stock exhaust. And yes, I am going to be running the stock exhaust, but it's a close fit. I will tell you guys that. Not as good as the factory, but it doesn't look as if it's hitting anything.
The only area of concern to me is a little bit right above this clamp. It's really close, and then the header on the actual frame up front is pretty close. But I'm going to trim that other piece, and I'll show you kind of what area I trimmed, and we'll put it back in place. And we're getting close to getting like oxygen sensors hooked up. And I think what I'll do next is, I don't have my oxygen sensors here yet, so I'm going to go up top and maybe put some spark plugs in. I wanted to show you with a little better lighting what I trimmed off here. This back corner, you can see I got two pieces. I just used some metal shears that I have. This stuff's pretty thin, but I do want to keep it in place. It does some of the wirings behind this, and just keeps exhaust heat off of it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back up in the truck, and then like I said, I think we'll move on to the spark plugs. So onto the spark plugs. TR55 by NGK is what I like to use. Now, these are a copper core, so they don't last as long as like the platinum. So if you want to go with the platinum, I understand. But to me, these idle a little smoother. So, and then if you talk about gap, you're going to get a different, everybody you ask is going to give you a different number. So depends on how you want it to idle. To me, at around 40 to 50 thousandths, these idle the best. If you go to like 60 thousandths, they might stumble a little bit here and there, but I mean, it'll still run fine. But I think we're going to check them out of the box. Generally, they're pretty close to like 60 thousandths. So if they are, I may just install them like that, to be honest with you. I don't even know that I'm going to gap them. I am going to check it just to make sure. But what I do is I like to thread them in by hand. So I've just got an extension on my spark plug socket, and I just like to thread them in by hand. I do put a little bit of anti-seize on them, guys, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to. It's just something that I like to do, and I don't put a ton on there, just enough to make sure they don't get stuck. And I've never had one stick on me, but I've heard horror stories of it happening. So I'm going to go ahead and thread all these in. I generally don't torque these. I just by hand. I get them hand tight with. I do put a ratchet on them. I don't just do it by hand, but don't over tighten them. There is a torque spec. I'm sure it's really low. My guess is around 18. That may be high, but I don't, like I said, it's not something I do. I'm just going to thread them in, get them snug, and then we'll move on to, I'd like to get the new, I bought a new housing for the actual thermostat, so I'd like to get that in place, and then I don't know, we'll just keep plugging away. But I'll show you guys the new thermostat housing here in just a second after I get these plugs in. Now that the plugs are all in, and I will tell you guys that the headers make it a little bit more cumbersome, but it wasn't bad. I think I had it all done in like 5 minutes. So anyway, let's move on to the thermostat and the thermostat housing. So there's two types of thermostats in these things. If you have the older thermostat housing, it's going to look like this. So it's going to have, now I pulled it out of here, but it's technically a stationary thermostat. So you can pull it out, but when you order a thermostat for these style, it generally comes with the housing and everything. Well, I already had a Motorad 160 thermostat. I actually have a 180 as well, but in order to do that, you need this housing. So this actually fits. You can see there's a spot here where it just sets in, and that's pretty much it. So this is the newer design. Anyway, the kit actually comes with both. So it comes with the new O-ring. If you have this style, that O-ring will obviously go in this outer ledge. And then if you have the older style, it comes with a gasket as well. So anyway, when I ordered this, the actual housing, actually I take that back. When I ordered the water pump bolts that I listed, they actually come with new bolts for the actual thermostat housing. So I'm going to be using those, just 8mm I believe is what these are. The original ones are 10, but I'm going to load this thing up in here and get this bolted into place. Once you get that in place, 11 foot-pounds is all it torques to, not a whole lot there. And I was going to paint this, guys, but I think that it looks pretty good the way it is. And there's going to be a black hose on the majority of it. You can see that I've taped off everything. I just don't want stuff to blow inside the motor. So I'm going to get this torqued down, and we'll move on. At this point, I've got the throttle cable holder, and all it does, it bolts. There's two 10mm that bolt on up top here, keep it in place, and it actually not only does that, but it holds the kind of the decorative cover. So you can see there's two bolt holes in the center of the intake here. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt that down. Two 10mm is all that is, and I left those in the intake the entire time so I wouldn't lose them. So I'm going to go ahead and put the evap line in place. If you guys remember when I put the fuel lines in, there were actually 3 lines. You got 2
a feed line, a return line, and then you had an evap line. So normally I would probably delete this if this were like going in another project, another hot rod or something like that. But because it's not, I'm gonna go ahead and put it back in place. It literally just snakes down. I'll be able to put it back through here and then just plug it in the back. And it's kind of hard to see, but I left the cover on it when I put the fuel lines in. I'm gonna go ahead and get that hooked up. And then there's another line that goes to the PCV. It comes out from under what I just covered up, but I can still sneak underneath here and get it plugged in. I'm gonna plug it in, and the other end obviously goes in the valve cover, but I think at that point I'll be able to put the engine cover on, and at least I feel like I've gotten somewhere.
So obviously, since the start of this video, we have, we've moved it onto the lift. The lift is actually over here in the shop now. And, well, it's time to continue the progress. So the next thing I'm going to be doing, you can see I'm running out of stuff, which is a good sign, right? But this guy right here. So unfortunately, on the 99 to actually 2004, I believe, does not come with an electric fan. So it comes with the old school belt-driven fan clutch, which is big and clunky and robs some power. Now, it's not going to make this thing a race car by any means by taking this off, but we do have to do some stuff to put this in place. So what this kit comes with, and I'll list it in the description down below, really nice, comes with 3 relays, comes with your power. So there's 2 tie-in points here. So let me see if I can lay this down with one hand and it not fall all over the place. So there's a couple different options you can go with as far as fans. I chose to go with the factory fans that fit like one of these trucks. And when I say that, like there's truck fans and then there's like F-body fans. So you can get whichever plug you're going to be using. Because of the fitment, in my opinion, I think these fit the best. So I chose to go with truck fans, and I did get a set of used truck fans. I actually got to clean up so they're not out here. But in order to do this, there's a couple things that you need to do. Obviously, we need to tie in with the computer system, but I went with a bigger radiator, which you'll see me install after I get this in place. I just wanted to have more room. I've thrown everything up against the side here as far as the ground and the power. And what we're going to need to get to are these, one of these harnesses here. And I don't remember which one it is offhand, but we have to put a pin in the factory harness, which you can see right here, they've installed for you. And then the other tie-in point is actually for the AC. So in order to make this work correctly, obviously there will be some computer programming, which we're going to have to do that anyway because we're going from a 4.3 to a 5.3. And we are using the same computer because the computer can be programmed. And the reason I like to do that instead of using the other computer is because the VIN matches. So it's not a big deal because, you know, nobody will probably ever be in this but me. But so I'm going to pull this apart and we'll talk about where it goes in the harness. And then the other tie-in point is actually in this line that comes right here. So there's a line that tags up against the alternator. And so that is going to be our tie-in point for the AC. So you notice they're not very long here. And then we have a series of power and grounds, obviously for the relays. So let's get this started. Like I said, I'll show you. I'm going to go ahead and take apart the pin or the harness here, and you can see why I wanted more room. I'm going to take apart the section that I need, and we'll talk about which one it is and where we're going to put this wire in. So actually the instructions say to start in a different spot. So I'm just going to go by the instructions. I've got them laid out here. But it's saying to open your little box here, this red box, and take the 17 millimeter off. And then we are going to put on, you can see there's 2 black, obviously those are grounds, and then you have 2 blue. Now the blue corresponds to a red and white. So we're going to put these on that post, and they are going to run out the bottom. Now in order to get this box to shut, we are going to have to take something and I'm just going to take some snips and trim the bottom of this so it can come out of the bottom. Now that I have that in place, you can see that I've got the 2 blue wires coming out of the bottom, and I did notch that. I just used a pair of side cutters. We can go ahead and close that off. And we can now, there's 2 grounds, and those grounds are going to ground right here on this bracket that actually mounts this whole pillar. So take one of your 10 millimeters out, doesn't really matter which one. In the pictures, they show the top one. To me, it makes more sense to do the bottom one. Just based on the amount of wire that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and take the 10 out and ground those 2 there.
So you can see I tied the ground in on the very bottom one. To me it looks a little nicer to put on the bottom one than the top one. So now we're going to open up these wires, this wiring harness that comes alongside of this box. I'm going to open this up, and we are looking for a green wire to tie in for our AC. Now it on the kit, and I'll try to show you the wire that I'm tagging into, it says it's a green wire. The wire could be light green and have a white stripe as well. It's basically saying that if your fan doesn't come on when the AC comes on, you've tapped the wrong one. So the downside is obviously in the position that we're at, I don't have the ability to test that because for one, the AC is completely drained, and two, we're not running yet. So I'm gonna go ahead and open it up. We'll look and see what wires are in there. If I can find the one that I think I need to tap, I'll go ahead and do that. If not, I might just leave this portion of tapping until the truck's actually running and we're ready to do that. Because the other fan that actually runs with the engine can go ahead and be hooked up through the computer. So we'll just open this up and see. And like I said, if I think I find the right wire, I'll go ahead and tap it and I'll show you guys that. So let's take a look at what we've got. So I opened that wiring harness up, and you can see there are 3 green wires in here. There is a light green, like what it says, and then there is a green with the white stripe, and then there's a green with no stripe. So it's got to be one of the two, either the light green or the green with the white stripe. But because I don't think I just want to randomly be tapping into wires, I think I'm going to test this, and it gives you a procedure to test it. It says to test the wire, a voltmeter may be used to test for the presence of 12 volts when the truck is running and the AC clutch is engaged. So I'm going to wait on this one. I'm going to leave this wire kind of tied up here for now, and we're going to come back and do that one once we get the truck actually running. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm probably just going to go ahead and tie all this back up just because it'll make me crazy for it to be open like this, and then we'll come back and do this once the truck is actually running. And now we'll move on to the actual harness or the piece that goes into the PCM here. So at this point there's 2 connectors, and you got a red connector, see it red there, and you got a blue. And so the blue one is the one we're wanting to mess with, and it says if you were installing this and the engine was already running, it would be the closest one to the engine if you didn't want to remove both. But in order to remove those, it's a 7mm, obviously mine's already removed, but now we need to take this gray clip off. And so I'm just going to use a small flat blade screwdriver to get that clip out of place. And we're also going to have to take the retaining clip, which is this white thing, out. And so you can see there's little white clips that hold it in place. So I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way, and then we'll move on to hopefully getting the wire pressed in place. So you can see I got the gray cover off, and actually it is not these white clips that you're trying to get loose. It's actually the ones that are in the corners here. So there's one there, and there, and there, and there. So you only need to get it off of the one side that we're going to be putting the wire in. If you want, you can go ahead and take them both off. Just a little plastic clip, and then this blue cover, you can see I've got it started to pull off here. So at this point you can see I got the clips off, and I took them both off because I couldn't see the numbers, but these are all numbered, and you can see really close there's numbers on this, and 42 is right here, and it actually has a plug in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that plug out, and then that is where our wire is going to come through, our blue wire. So it is right beside, I'd love to tell you the color, but I can't tell. It looks like a gray, but it's pin number 42. So as you can see, I got it pushed through slot number 42, and guys, you can push it too far, it'll actually push out. All these do that. So it's not a big deal. You just need to tug on it and make sure it doesn't pull backwards. So I wish I could show you, I just don't have enough hands, but if you continually push this through, it'll push out too far. You just want to make sure that when you're pulling it back, it clicks. And so we are in place. And there is, I will tell you guys, it looks like there's a plug in there. Don't worry about that. Just push around, it'll push around that. So if you're trying to push that plug out, it is not going to come out. But now we can reassemble this, and I'm going to go ahead and get the PCM and put it into place. So you can see I got the computer clipped in. So it just clips in here. Oh man, look, one of the clips broke. Pretty common. But as long as you get it in its channel and use this clip as a retainer to hold it in place, you're good. Now, we're ready to go ahead and use the 7mm and put this on, but you need to make sure these guys, that just keeps water out of the harness and stuff, you need to put those on. Now, you could set and try forever to put them on the actual PCM, but guys, the easiest way is to just put them on, I've already got one on here, put them on the actual clip, and you won't have to wrestle with that. But then we can go ahead and get the 7mm and tighten this all down. So at this point we've got the computer in, and you can see that I've got the cover on. Now I don't have it completely put on as of yet, because in the upper left corner, and from the pictures, it seems like it's right here. So you're going to use some self-tapping screws that they sent with the kit to locate all of your relays. So the 3 relays will locate right here. So I'm going to go ahead and snap this into place, and then I'm going to bolt it on, and then I'll probably take it off just to make sure we're not hitting anything. So you can see at this point we've got all the relays mounted, and so you've got your 2 ones that go to your fan, your 2 plugs that go to your fan, and like I said, I'm going to come back later and hook up the green one. I'm going to zip tie it up for now so it's out of the way. And then the loom is not bad from what they send you. When you come out to go to the ground in that green wire, to me, I'm going to put some loom on that because it looks kind of trashy. But other than that, I think we'll move on at this point to, we'll go grab the, well, yeah, we're going to go grab the radiator and possibly get it in place.
So as far as radiators go, there's 2 different sizes, and obviously going to the electric fans that are on the newer style trucks, there's I believe it's a 34 and a 28. So mine, being a 6-cylinder truck, had the smaller one. Well, the smaller one won't fit the electric fans that I'm wanting to use. So I did order a brand new GM one, and to me, guys, look, if a GM one lasts like 300, 400,000 miles like they do, to me, that's the best one to buy. You can buy whatever you want. I will link this one in the description down below, but to me, this is the one that you want if you're going to be doing that. So I'm going to go ahead. The cool thing about it is it comes with new rubber isolators, not only on the bottom, but on the top. So you don't have to worry about keeping your old ones. Honestly, I did keep my old ones because I was afraid that this one wouldn't come with one. But we're going to go ahead and see if we can set this in place. So we've got the radiator in, and I will tell you guys, look, you can buy whatever radiator you want, but GM stuff just fits. It fits right, and so all we have to do, it sets in 2 little pods in the bottom, which, like I said, it comes with new gaskets and grommets. Same way at the top, and the only thing that bolts this thing on are a couple 13mm bolts up top. And so we're going to go ahead and slide that up in place. Now make sure these little flaps here go up and don't get folded over. They need to go up here as you're pushing it in place. But other than that, we are good to bolt this thing up. Now that we got the radiator snugged up, we're going to go ahead and start putting some radiator hoses on. So some of these have been replaced on the truck that I was swapping, some of them haven't. So the ones that haven't been replaced, I'm replacing. This upper one had been replaced. I'm going to go ahead, and GM makes it really dummy proof, guys. Radiator up, tank up. So this one goes here, and then we'll just work our way through all of them. And like I said, the only one actually that hadn't been replaced on this truck, or the swap truck, was the upper radiator hose. So I am going to buy a new one of those. It goes from up here all the way over to the top of the water pump. So I am going to replace that one, but the other ones are all in good shape, and they actually have been replaced, so with actual GM parts, which is kind of crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in place, and then I'm not sure what we'll move on to next. We'll just keep trying to find stuff that hasn't been plugged in quite yet. So as you can see at this point, I've got a couple of the lines in place. Now the downside is I need to go ahead and get the AC line in before I hook any more up. And then the ones that actually go to the heater core, I'm gonna probably have to leave those loose until I get my valve covers. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and put the AC line in. So it comes off of the, obviously the compressor down there, and goes underneath, and it hooks onto the line right here. And then the other goes up to the firewall and hooks on up to the firewall. So what I did was I did replace all of these gaskets. So there's a little rubber gasket there. It's like a washer with a gasket built into it, and I replaced all those. And the reason why, guys, is they look kind of rough, and I just don't want to have any leaks. So they make a kit that replaces all of them in the entire system, and to be honest, it's probably cheaper to buy that whole kit. But this is just, I don't want to put this thing together and then have to end up pulling it apart to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get this in place. I'm going to bolt this in first, and then we're just going to have to route the lines around where we need them. And then I can probably go ahead and start putting the rest of the lines in. I just don't want to have to be trying to move this, because obviously this is a lot of hard line in place, and there's just not a whole lot of movement with this piece like there is with the rubber hoses. So I'm going to go ahead, get it in place, and get it bolted down at least. And then we'll move back to the rubber hoses. So for the most part, I have all the hoses installed. This one here, I'm going to leave loose to make it easier to get my fans in. But let's look at this one here. So the one that goes on the middle
of the actual radiator and then comes to the throttle body. Remember, we bypassed the throttle body early. I've got vacuum caps on it. Well, what we need to do is this line here needs to connect to the line that comes out of the coolant bypass. So that goes under the intake, that piping that goes under the intake. So what I've done is I got a, let's see if I can find it here. I got a piece of piping that fits in between there, as well as some hose clamps. So this guy right here just goes in between and links those two together so we don't have to go through the throttle body. So I just wanted to show you guys that before I hooked it up, because I'm sure that some of you are probably wondering why I'm not hooking up like it normally would, which is very simple. All you would have to do is hook here where I put the cap. The other side goes on the other end, and not much to it. But I'm gonna go ahead and get this in line. And then at that point, guys, my painter actually just called me and he has my valve covers done. So hopefully I can run out there and get my valve covers. And I think, oh, he did something else for me. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, we're gonna run out there and grab those, and then we'll hopefully get those in. And that's really tying up me hooking up like the, I can't even think of what it's called. Oh, the heater core, because I can't really get to stuff. Can't put the oil dipstick tube in and stuff like that until I get the heater core hooked up and the valve covers on. So anyway, we'll get this in place and then we'll get the valve covers. So take a look at these. Just got these back from the painter, and as you can see, they are green like the truck. Now, I told him not to spend a ton of time on this, guys. I told him just to spray them. And I really didn't care for him to sand them down. I scuffed them up before I took them to him, and I had them taped up on the front, like these spots here, but he taped up the back, and it looks really nice. Good enough for what I'm wanting to do. You know, it's not perfect under the hood, but I wanted to make it look a little bit nicer. So I'm gonna go grab my 8mm. We're gonna take these out, the old ones out, and then I do have new gaskets that I've been waiting to put on. That's these guys right here, new GM gaskets. So we're gonna see if we can get these things installed and be finished with that for now. And then now that I've got that, we can go ahead and put like the oil dipstick tube in. I can go ahead and plug these hoses in that I was waiting on. And we're getting a lot closer. It's getting exciting, guys. So I'm gonna go, like I said, grab the 8mm. I'll take those off. I am gonna clean the head surface, like the mating surface there, just to make sure it's nice and clean. I'll use some like carb cleaner or brake cleaner on a towel just to make sure it's clean, and then we'll get these in place. So I've got the new gasket in place, and I went ahead, like I said, and I cleaned the area where it would be mounting. I know you guys probably hear me. I'm stepping on my ramps every time I come up here. Anyway, so I'm ready to put this thing on. I go around this a couple times, guys, so put it in and then go around it, and if you see any areas, actually there's an area right there, just kind of pinch it in place. You don't want it to be coming out of there. Like I said, I generally go around it at least twice, and it looks like I need to go around it one more time. But I'm gonna slide this thing in place and get the bolts locked down. So now that I have them on both sides, it is 106 inch-pounds, and you're gonna work your way from the middle out. So start with one of the middle ones, and then go to the other middle one, and then both the outside ones. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque both sides down, and then, like I said, we can move on to hooking up some of these other hoses. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the oil fill in. I say, there's a certain way it goes in. I think it just, it's a tight fit if I remember right. I think I'm gonna have to have two hands. Well, maybe not. There we go. All right, so once we get that in, all we gotta do is obviously put the cap on. Actually, it's not seated all the way. And then on the other side, in the very back, there's this little rubber grommet that I cleaned up. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in place, and our PCV comes off the intake and into it. I'm gonna go grab it next. So as I said, in the very back of this side, you're gonna put your PCV. That's hard to say when you're used to saying PVC. Anyway, it goes back there, and then there's a spot right here on the intake that it plugs into. Now, if this needs replaced, it won't make any noise. So listen. That means it's good, it's not sticking. So if you want to, you can get a replacement. Mine is good. I know it looks kind of rough, but it's actually in good shape. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in. I might go to a catch can setup down the road. That's why I'm not gonna replace this. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and tuck this in place. And then there is another piece that goes on the throttle body to the front valley cover here, or the valve cover. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that piece in as well. So as you can see, I've got that hose on that goes from the throttle body to the valve cover. I went ahead and hooked up my 2 lines that go into the heater core. I'm gonna wait on the AC line because I wanna go ahead and get my coil packs in place first, but I really wanna put this on. I don't know why. I think because it makes me feel like I'm further than what I am. And so anyway, I'm gonna put this thing on to make me feel good. I could still get to everything. I was literally just waiting to get the valve covers because that line that went over here and the line to the throttle body. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and use, I think they're 8 millimeters. They might be 10. I think they're 8. I'm gonna go ahead and bolt this thing in place. And I'm still waiting for the alternator to come, but I need to paint a couple other pieces. Obviously the tensioner on this side's not on. I need to paint it, and I'm not really sure where I'm gonna go next. I need to clean on the fans a little bit. Like I said, I did buy them used, and so I need to clean them up because they are absolutely disgusting. But at this point, we're just gonna have to figure something else out to work on until I get the alternator in and I get this other stuff painted. So I've decided, I spent about an hour cleaning these. I took all this apart and cleaned them up real nice. I didn't want to put them in all dusty and gross like they were. I thought they were in a little better shape, but they were just really, really dirty, especially the one that's closest to the oil fill, which is this guy right here. It was just coated, you know, just probably from overpouring. But I'm gonna go ahead and put these on, and guys, they just go on with the same 10 millimeters that I took them off with. And then this guy actually goes on the passenger side in order to hold your lines that go into the heater core. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these things on, and then we'll take a look at it. Got those in place, just those 10 millimeters. There's 5 on each side. And they set a little higher than like the F-body ones, so you can still see, you know, some of my green paint. I'm also waiting on some plug wires to come in, and I did order some different plug wires. The factory ones were just, they were pretty gross looking. They had been replaced, but I didn't like the way they looked. So anyway, you can see this piece here that holds those lines so they're not just flopping around. So I think we'll probably move on to the fans next. I still have to scrub them down, and by that time, hopefully the paint will be dry on the other parts I need to put on. At this point, I'm ready to put an alternator on, and this truck came with a 105 amp alternator, and because we're going to be putting electric fans on, and I'll eventually probably put a stereo in, and there's going to be more electronics on this, I wanted to up the amperage, and so this is a 220 amp, and I will list this in the description down below. It comes in a nice satin black finish, which will kind of match everything else that we did on the front and look really nice. So let's get it in. There's really not a whole lot to it. The couple things you need to know is it is a 4-prong plug. If you have a 2-prong, they make a different one. So unless you guys want to buy an adapter, make sure you get the right one for your vehicle. But like I said, I'll list the one that I've bought here down in the description. Other than that, the plug and the power and the 2 15s here that hold it on, that is all we need to get this thing in place. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on and get this stuff hooked up. Now that we've got that hooked up, I did torque these to 37 foot-pounds. You don't have to torque them, I just get them snug. But I did go ahead and torque them, if you guys want to know the spec. And then we've got the 10 millimeter hooked up back here that actually powers this whole thing, and the plug. So that's just an easy plug in. It's right here and accesses pretty easy. I think it looks pretty good on this truck. Anyway, so at this point, I've got a majority of stuff hooked up. I'm still waiting on paint to dry for the idler, but I can go ahead and hook up. We've got all the grounds hooked up here and routed over here where they need to go, but I need to hook this power up that goes and powers the actual fuse box. And then I'm gonna lift this thing up off the ground. This is just a 10 millimeter, by the way. Actually, that's an 8 millimeter that hooks this back up to the fuse block. I'm gonna lift it up in the air. I haven't put oxygen sensors in it. I'm actually going to reuse the ones I have. I'm also gonna screw the oil filter on while I'm under there. So I've got this thing up in the air, and like I said, the few things that I want to do while I'm down here, as you can see, I've still got the plugs where the O2 sensors are going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get those in. I've got them out here, and on both sides. This one's going to be a pretty tight fit on this side. And then once I do that, I've got my Mobil 1 oil here and my filter. And so I'm going to go ahead and put the oil filter on, make sure everything is tight down here. And I've got my dipstick tube. That I'm going to have to jump up on the lift, but I've got a plug in there
just to keep dirt and debris out of where the actual dipstick goes. So I'm gonna try to jump up there and see where I need to snake it down to so I'm not lifting this thing back up and down. The other thing I was painting, guys, is this little cross member that goes in here, which obviously you can see it's not in place. Also, while I'm down here, so I am gonna use that to fill up the filter. So that's why I've got the oil over here. But I'm gonna take some towels and some brake clean, and I'm gonna wipe off this exhaust. And the reason I'm gonna do that is it's gonna smoke when we initially start it up, and I'm just trying to mitigate the amount of smoke that comes off of it, because I know that, you know, my dirty hands riding up against this, it's definitely gonna have some smoke. The other thing is we're gonna make sure clearances on everything is good down here, and then we're gonna set it down and we're gonna start putting some fluids in it. So I've got the filter on. I went ahead and tightened this up. I didn't know how tight I got it originally. I wiped everything down. I've got the oxygen sensors installed, and guys, the plug for the front oxygen sensor, you know, most of the time on like F bodies, you have to get extension harnesses, and on these, you do not. So I've got this plugged in. It's right above the shift linkage, and then the back one, or the front one here on the other side, actually comes up on this side of the frame rail. So no extensions needed on this, and then the back ones, obviously we don't have any catalytic converters, so there won't be any. So at this point, I think I'm ready to let it down. Got everything snugged up. I went ahead, like I said, and cleaned off all the headers like I was going to with some brake clean, and let's set this thing down and maybe put some oil in it. Now that we're back up top, I've got the cap off. Like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and put some oil in it. I think these things call for 6 quarts, but I'm going to basically just fill it up with 5. We'll check it, and then obviously at the point where we start it, we'll check it again. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put power steering fluid in as well while I'm here, and I'll probably go ahead and put some transmission fluid in. So as far as fluids that I'm using Mobil 1 530 for the oil. I'm using Valvoline, Dextron 3, 4, something like that. I don't even remember. It's over here on the shelf. Let me see. And then I'm using Redline for power steering fluid, just because that's what I have here. It's not necessary, but I do have a lot of it, as you can see. And then Valvoline, Dexmerc, and that's what I'm using for fluid, the same stuff that I put in the actual converter when I took it apart. As far as fluid goes for the transmission, I'm not as concerned about it right now. I'm just probably going to put, you know, maybe 4 or 5 quarts in. That's generally standard for when you change a filter. So I'm just going to put that much in. Same way with the oil, and then we will be just checking the fluids as they kind of settle out. I just wanted to kind of pour those in, let them settle while I'm doing other stuff, and then we'll top off as needed. But I think that's our next step. I need to get a battery hooked up so I can scan the computer, take the 4.3 software, lay it over a 5.3 software, and get that changed as well. So I got, I think 5 quarts, a little over 5 quarts is what I put in for oil. It is showing full. Of course, when we start it, you know, it's going to fill the filter the rest of the way up, and we're gonna probably have to put some in it. But I went ahead and put 7 quarts in the transmission. Generally 5 is what it calls for when you're just doing a filter change. Obviously, we put at least a quart in the converter when we put it in. So it's gonna take more than that. I didn't want it to start dry. The other thing is I took about, I don't know, maybe half of that container, that quart container for the power steering. That's gonna take some more as well. What I've got here is I don't have my new plug wires yet, so I'm sure you guys know where this is going. I'm wanting to see if this thing will start. So I'm going to put these old plug wires off of I think they're all aftermarket except for one's a GM. I'm gonna put those in place. I'm gonna wipe down the headers up here one more time. I'm gonna go grab my computer and a battery, and then I am gonna have to hook up the mass airflow sensor. I'm not gonna hook up the tube yet because obviously we don't have the fans in place and we don't have any coolant. What I'm wanting to see though is this thing gonna turn over and fire? And so that's the ultimate goal. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna walk you guys through kind of how I'm going to be doing the computer setup, as well as just getting this thing started all together. But anyway, I'm gonna put these on. Like I said, I'm gonna go grab a battery, and then we're gonna start the scanning process to get the old information out of the computer, and then we'll go from there. So at this point, got a battery hooked up. I've got my computer out here, and I've got HP tuners pulled up. You can see the lights are on in the truck. So I'm going to go grab the key. We're going to plug our HP tuners in. And then what we are going to do, guys, is we are going to read, which is this column right here. At the very top, you can, well, it's actually on right. Take that back. Let's close out. And then we'll be able to connect and read. That was the right one. It always opens up in the last one you ran for some reason, which was the Tahoe and did the DOD delete. So I'm going to plug this in. We should be able to plug this in at this point, and we should see power on this, and we do, which is good. And then I tell you what, let's just go ahead and read it right now. I'm going to have to go grab the key though. So now I have the key in the ignition. You want to turn it to the run, but not try to start. If you try to start it, guys, it's not going to run because it's still on the V6 parameters. Once we do that, we can go here to read and tire. And so it's going to attempt to read. I may have to connect first. Let's see what it does here. Yeah, let's go to file, or not file, but tools maybe. It's been a while since I've been in here. Maybe not. Let's try read here. Sometimes it doesn't read it the first time. Sometimes it does. Oh, good. It's reading it. It's showing it's a 6-cylinder computer. Yeah, at the very top you see 2002 GMC 1500 4.3 V6. But if you look at hardware, it shows P01 ECM Gen 3 V8 and V6. So the reason I like to use this computer is you can see the VIN number here. That actually will match if anybody ever pulled this up. So nobody would even know that this truck actually came as a 6-cylinder truck unless they like ran a Carfax or something. But once we read this, we'll save it, and then I'll show you. We're going to open a comparison file, and all we're going to do is we're going to zero out those differences between a V8 truck and a V6 truck. So as you can see, I've got HP tuners open. So once I got that scanned, I did save it. So this is the current file on the truck. So what I'm looking for here is on HP tuners, if you have their product and you're registered on their website, you can go into what they call the tune repository. So what we have here is I typed in a 2002 Chevrolet Silverado GMC Sierra, it doesn't really matter. And what you'll have here is different files that people have put up for others to view. Now take this on at your own risk, because they could have put something in here and HP tuners doesn't regulate this. So what I'm looking for is a stock file, and you can see that this one's a 4.8 truck stock bin file. This is a stock tune file. And then you can see this one's a 6-liter and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to look for is there's an 8.1, a 6.0, and then if it has any mods and they messed with it, it tells you what they did, the mods here, and then what is changed, just kind of quick notes on what's changed. But if I scroll down a little bit, right here I have a 2002 Silverado, and this is a stock file. So I'm going to download this file, and it's saying HP Tuners is not responsible if this isn't, the right file. The other thing I could do is I could technically hook up the other computer out of the swap truck, and I could move it into this truck, scan it, and then make comparisons that way. I'm still going to have to adjust because sorry, I'm trying to read this and that. I'm still going to have to make adjustments because I'm going with electric fans, and a 2002 did not have that. But what I'm looking for is to get the thing running right now. We can go back and change that later. So I'm going to download this file, and then once I do that, I can open them and overlap them and see what the differences are. So you can see that I've got the original file open that I scanned out of the truck, and if you go here to compare, you can say open compare file. And we are going to look for downloads here. And this 2957, that's the one I just downloaded from HP Tuner's website. So what you'll see here is this, if you select up here at the top, you can see this is the file that I have open, the original file. So my truck. Then you can click here. That is the comparison file. And then right here will show you the differences. So everything that you see highlighted in green will have to be changed. But if you go to compare, you can go view comparison log, I believe is what it is. and it will show you each one of the things that you need to change. So that is essentially what we need to do. We need to go through, there is a lot of stuff, guys, and I'll probably do this off camera, but let's just go into the first one, for instance. Let's go to cylinder volume. Actually, let's go to engine type, because that one's an easy one. So right here, because I'm on comparison, I can't make any changes. But if I go to the original one, you can see that it shows 6-cylinder 4.3. If I go to the other one, it shows 5.3. It's grayed out because I can't change it either. So what I would need to do is I would need to select this to 5.3, and you could see it went red. And then I can actually go to File and save these changes. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to go through each one of these individually, and I'm going to change them to match what the other file is. Another thing you can do is if you open both, the ones that are grayed out you can't change, but you can also go here and zero the difference. So this is saying cylinders, there's -2 difference. We can go to 0, we can go to 0 here. All the ones that are green, you can zero out the difference. And once you do that, then you can click back over to your file and change this from, like, you can see enable, disable. You can change those ones that are grayed out while you're in the comparison file. I know that's kind of tricky, and by no means, like I said, guys, am I a tuner, but this is easy enough where all you have to do is go through and change the things that you need to change. And then we'll talk about, once I get all this done, like I said, this is probably going to take me at least an hour. We will come back and I will show you what we need to do, because we're going to have to license this new file. We're going to have to license this VIN number. And you need to make sure that you're licensing the new one or the old one, that you like the truck you're going into, and not the comparison file, because I've done that in the past, and that's a big waste of $100, because it's $99 for 2 credits. It's $49 per credit. So make sure that you don't do that. But we'll get into that once I get all this stuff changed and everything is saved. So once I go through and change all these things, I keep opening the compare and the view log, making sure that there's nothing left in there. Go to File, Save As, and I save the stock file as just stock 4.3. I'm going to save this one as stock 4.3 to 5.3. So after spending about, I don't know, maybe an hour doing this, it is time to buy the credits, which, if you guys don't know, I did in the last video. It gives you an option to purchase credits online here, and then it'll open the internet and you can buy credits. Like I said, it takes 2 credits to do what we're doing, and it won't even let you save the file until you purchase the credits. So I'm going to go ahead and buy them. The only things that I altered from is, actually, let's just go ahead and show you here. If you go into systems, it looks like a picture of a fan. You can see that I chose on fans that I have 2 fans, and the other file obviously did not have that. And then I was going to go into Speedo and put in 373 gear ratio, but the truck that I actually used for comparison had that, because as you know, we did change to a 373. So at this point, I'm going to buy the credits. We'll load them on the cable, and then we will flash, which is this guy up here, but I'm going to save it first. So like I said, you can't save until you actually buy the credits. Make sure, hopefully you open the file on your vehicle first, and then the comparison file is the second file that you opened. And if you do that, generally you won't screw up and accidentally register the wrong vehicle. Make sure that the VINs match when it pops up and asks, and buy the credits and use them for that VIN. But once we get finished, like I said, once I save it, I'm going to hit this, once the key's back in, and we'll flash it, and then we'll give it a shot. So at this point, we have the file saved, and so we're ready to write. So I'm going to go ahead and plug our stuff in here. I unplugged it from earlier, and should be able to go to write, and we are going to write entire. You can write calibration only, but when I'm changing as much as I want to change, I want to write entire. So I'm going to go ahead and click write, and it does show you that it's brickable. It could screw things up, but I just like to do write entire when I'm changing this many things at one time. So it says 1 minute and 46 seconds, and then we'll give her a go. One other thing I'll tell you guys is, obviously we don't have a belt on, no water in the water pump. And I did go ahead and hook up the mass airflow sensor just so it sees something. But we're just doing this to see if it'll crank over, if it'll fire up. We're not going to let it run that long.
So at this point, it's flashed. We're gonna go key it up and see what happens. The other thing, guys, is make sure you're watching, a couple things you wanna watch for, obviously any fuel leaks. You also wanna watch your oil pressure to make sure it's gonna stay low for a minute until that pump activates or starts turning and pumps some oil pressure up. It also might be kind of noisy.